Good morning. It is Monday, May 15th, the day after Mother's Day. I hope those of you who are mothers out there or mother in some capacity had a great day yesterday. I hope you found yourself resting a little bit. I had children who argued all day. Happy Mother's Day to me. Actually, it's kind of funny. Over the last 20 years or so of parenting, Troy and I find that Mother's Day and Father's Day are the days when our children fight most of all. Isn't that nice? So now it's kind of humorous and hilarious because it happens every single year. It's so funny. So anyway, for those of you who, good morning, Susan, for those of you who celebrated yesterday, I hope that it was a good day. And if it wasn't a good day or a complicated day, then congratulations, you survived till Monday. Good morning, Audra. So last week on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I headed to the mountains with a few of the members of my mastermind. Some of you know that I lead the Inspired Life Mastermind, which is a mastermind gathering of 12 different women plus myself and a couple people on my team. And this mastermind for women is really a collection of women who are in business, but also women of faith who want to figure out how to live out their personal mission in business and relationship and in their personal life to the best of their ability. And so we spend a lot of time talking about business. Hi there, Geraldine. We spend a lot of time talking about business, but we also talk about personal development and relational health and all that stuff. Well, we went away for 3 days, 3 days, 2 nights for a little mastermind get together, and only half of the group, like 6 of us, could get together out of the whole group. This was kind of an impromptu gathering. And so it was a rather small group. However, over the course of 3 days, we get 6 women who are women of faith who are also leaders, influencers in business. And you get those together, and we had quite a variety of conversation. And obviously a lot of conversation that was just lighthearted, fun conversation, but we also dove into some pretty tough topics. Hi there, Gina. So, for example, I'll give you a sampling. So in this group of women, there's multi-denominations represented. I mean, so many different denominations, so many different faith backgrounds. So there's a wide variety of that. So we talked a lot about faith differences. Hey there, Renee. We talked about faith differences, but we also then dove into conversation about the church, because all of us are in different ways have noticed that there's a lot of struggle going on within the American church as a whole. And so we talked about some of those struggles and what we're seeing in our current culture, American culture, and things like that. We also talked about femininity and what femininity really means, and the role of women in the church and the wide variety of that. Holy cow, I know, it's like, are we really going to talk about this? We also talked about gender and sexuality and how it's playing out in our culture and what we all feel about that, our own convictions and all that. So let's just say it was a number of hot topics. Like how? What were we thinking? We should have talked about pedicures and brands of chocolate, although we did talk a lot about chocolate. So we have all of these pretty heated topics that we're talking about, and we have 6 women who are intelligent, smart, influential women with their own convictions. They are all entrepreneurs, leading in some capacity. And we talked about this. And what was so incredible is we had these conversations where there was a wide variety of convictions and opinions on these different topics. And not once did it get heated or hostile or defensive. As a whole, because we talked about this group, nobody felt threatened or disrespected. And even when there were people who had completely opposite opinions, like one person on this end of the spectrum, one person on this end of the spectrum, at the end of the conversation, everybody still felt honored and respected and loved and appreciated. And we came through these 3 days after multiple different conversations, actually closer in many ways. And I think came through it having learned something through the different conversations and dialogues. And so we marveled at it, frankly, because how often does that really happen? I mean, right now in our culture, especially between American culture and those who hold to the Christian faith. There seems to be a ton of tension. A lot of tension, a lot of different, and I would say even within the Christian culture, there are so many people that are wrestling with big issues, big hot topics, and those topics are so personal in many ways that it's creating lots of divides. It's creating lots of conflict and divisions and tensions between people who claim to share the same faith. And this is heartbreaking to witness and to see. And yet all of us are part of this greater family called, first of all, called humanity, but greater family called the church as well. And so how do we engage in healthy dialogue about hot topics without losing relationship? How can we interact with each other and maintain our convictions and have our own convictions without dishonoring the convictions or the process of somebody else? Because we're all at our own place in this journey. Good morning, Donna. And some of us feel like if we allow other people to have their convictions or their opinions without asserting our own, that somehow we're being wishy-washy on our own, and that's just not true. One thing I have come to discover as I've been processing through this myself, and by the way, I'm someone who historically, if somebody believed different than me, I felt so threatened by it that I would feel defensive and almost emotionally shut down because I was so afraid of losing ground on my own opinion or position or whatever. So I don't feel that way anymore. And really how I've come to this place where I know what I believe, but I don't feel threatened by somebody else's belief, is that I actually did more of my own homework to come to a place where what I stood on is more of a conviction and less of an opinion, okay? And let me explain that. Many times you and I hold to beliefs that really is, quite honestly, more of an emotional opinion that we hold to, but we really haven't done the homework of studying the Bible or studying the research or studying whatever to really thoughtfully, intelligently process through and come to a place of true conviction that's based on our own thoughtful study. And so when we hold to very emotional, personal opinions, then when somebody feels differently than us, we feel immediately threatened by that. And so anger is a first response, because really behind all of that is fear. We're fear of our kind of personal opinion being compromised, and that fear often spirals into anger. And so then that's what makes us defensive and angry. When, or at least for me personally, when I have done the homework to process through what I believe and why I believe it, and really thoughtfully and prayerfully process through that, then I know what I believe, and I'm not the least bit threatened by somebody else's stance or conviction on that. I can allow them the freedom to be on their own journey with that and to be praying and being thoughtful about that without feeling threatened by it. Okay, so in short, thoughtful conviction is far less defensive and far less likely to get angry than personal or emotional opinions. So, good morning, Gwen. So as you are wanting to engage in healthy dialogue about hot topics, this is something that's very important to keep in mind. Your own personal journey in wrestling with these topics is so critical to your ability to be in healthy and dialogue about it. And gosh, I wish I would have learned that 20 years ago. I wish I would have known this a long time ago. It would have saved me a lot of difficult conversations. So anyway, as I think about how things transpired with my Mastermind women, talking about these hot topics in a very healthy way, I really came up with what I felt like were 3 ingredients that were present through our time together that enabled us to have these conversations that ended up with a closer relationship at the end and not a disintegrated one. And the first ingredient is so critical, and it really has everything to do with you and not the other person, and that's humility. Humility is a gosh, it's such a neglected attribute. It's such a neglected quality. We are so concerned in our culture about being confident and self-assured and all of this that we have forgotten about the beauty and the strength of humility. Humility, simply even acknowledge that even after all your hours of prayer and study and everything, that there remains the possibility that maybe there's a different perspective, that maybe there's a different insight, and keeping yourself in that state of humility, knowing that God alone knows all truth, God alone is all wise, and that you and I, as much as we may feel our conviction, we have to always acknowledge that that conviction is coming through a vessel of humanity. A vessel of humanity that can be wrong at times, that is fragile and broken and distorted, and we are bringing them information and coming to a place of conviction through a filter of our own experiences and our own biases and our own humanity. And this is hard to admit because we don't want to admit that we have biases, but even when we are the most well-intentioned, you and I have filters and biases that are influencing our convictions and opinions. And so we need to approach these conversations with great humility that acknowledges our humanity. The second ingredient is a commitment to listen. An absolute staunch commitment to listen. And boy, when we feel fear or threatened or anger, listening goes right out the window. The last thing we want to do is listen. And by the way, pause real quick. I'm talking about healthy dialogue about hot topics with my women, but this also applies in marriage. It also applies in parenting for those of you who are having difficult conversations with teenagers or maybe grown children that believe differently than you. So this whole conversation that we're talking about today is applicable in any kind of tense conversation situation where there's a difference of opinion, okay? So humility is the first, but second ingredient was a commitment to listen. I'm talking about that you are going in with not just an urge to say what you believe and to dump what you believe or to communicate what you believe, but you are going in truly hungry to hear what the other person thinks and feels and believes and why. And you may disagree 1,000%, and yet you want to know what the other person has to say, where they're coming from. And really behind that desire to listen, really behind that has to be a deep well of love. And this is not, I'm not being cheesy, I'm dead serious. When you disagree with somebody vehemently, your love for the person has to be greater than your passion for your position. Your love for the other person has to be deeper and greater than your passion for your position. That's what enables you to listen. And the truth is when you love the other person, and when you put that really on the forefront, okay? So when you love the other person, even more than holding on to your conviction, and when that love is there, you don't lose anything of your position. You don't lose anything of your conviction. It just enables you to honor the other person and hear them. Okay, so the first ingredient was humility. The second is listening. This staunch commitment to listen, which is really that ability is sourced in a deep well of love for the other person. And then finally, respect. Just having this respect for people. And that just has to be there. We have lost some of that in our desire to be heard and our desire to defend or to stand up for what we believe is right. We think disrespecting is justified by the end. In other words, that the means is justified by the end, and it's just not true. There is nowhere in the Bible where it is okay for us to disrespect people in order to make our position heard. It's not okay. In fact, we diminish the credibility of what we stand for when we disrespect and dishonor people in the process. And once again, I wish I would have learned this years ago. Dang it. And so the irony is, and Gwen, I'm so glad you posted James 1:19, because that's exactly what's on my notes right here, and I'm getting to that. So I spent these 3 days with the Mastermind. We engaged in all kinds of hot topics about crazy subjects. I mean, oh my goodness, we talked about it all, and we did so with such respect, and we all came back with kind of a broader understanding and perspective, and none of us lost our convictions, none of us lost where we kind of stand, but we had such a broader understanding of that and a deeper relationship as a result of it. And then I got home Saturday afternoon, went to church Saturday night, and the sermon was on James 1:19. And James 1:19 is talking about, it's just that pretty well-known verse that says that we should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, which is pretty close to being a wrap-up of these 3 ingredients that I talked about: humility, listening, and respect. Humility, listening, and respect. And I think it's important at this point too for you and I to acknowledge that our human response is going to be to do the opposite. It just is. In the emotion of the moment, we just get caught in the emotion, and our adrenaline kicks in and the fight or flight response kicks in, and boy, we just do the opposite of those things. But if we can learn to have humility, to enter these conversations with great humility, to listen before we speak, and not listen so that way we know when the conversation is going to pause so we can jump in with our thing, but I mean to truly listen and to allow for silence, and then to always, always above everything to show respect. I think we all could engage in some great dialogue about hard topics. We could learn something as a result. And imagine if you and I, as Christians, as people who represent the gospel, if we handle ourselves in this way, oh my goodness, what could possibly be a more beautiful light on the truth than being the kind of people who know how to enter these conversations with humility, listening, and respect. So anyway, that was my big takeaway from this week. I guarantee you that sometime in the next 7 days, this is going to be hard to do. So one thing that I would love for you to do is, and I'm going to do the same thing, I love to use these little index cards. I use bright colors because it captures my attention. And top, on the top of that card, you can do how to, basically how to have healthy dialogue about hot topics without losing the relationship in the process. And just write down humility, listen, respect. Humility, listen, respect. Or you can write James 1:19 down and just say quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. And then what I'm doing is underneath all of that is I'm just writing this sentence, God, I trust you in this hard thing. In other words, I don't have to defend this position. Ultimately, this is God's position or God's deal. And just to say, God, I trust you in this thing. That means I don't have to be offensive or angry or feel threatened because, God, I trust you in this thing. So I'm going to commit to love and humility and listening and trust that God is pretty good at guarding his own ground on topics that I feel like are so urgent. So I'll pray for us, friends. Thank you, God, so much for this day. Thank you for this week. I thank you ahead of time for the opportunities that you will bring our direction to engage in hard dialogue. I acknowledge ahead of time, God, that will be very hard for me to do at times. I will launch into an emotional place and I won't respond the right way. And so, God, I'm asking for all of us that are part of this conversation that you would give us a blanket of humility and respect and a deep sense of your love for other people that would help carry us through those kind of dialogues where at the end of it, God, that our relationship is stronger and that your gospel is better seen as a result of it than the opposite, God. We love you and we give you this week. We just honor you, God, in Jesus' name, amen. All right, friends. I know, hard conversation, right? But that's what No Makeup Monday is about. I told you we would talk about unplug things and try to be as honest as possible about these things. So circle back around. Let me know how it goes. And if you have any additional wisdom or insights on how to engage in healthy dialogue about hot topics, I would love for you to leave it in the comment section. So I love you. I love you. Have a great week.